The desert air base shimmered under the relentless Nevada sun like a mirage made permanent. Its runway stretched between red rock formations and the endless expanse of sagebrush. Morning light glinted off the sleek metal skins of F-22 Raptors. Arranged in perfect formation, their stealth contours absorbing the heat of the day without complaint. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Major Olivia Phoenix Mitchell approached her aircraft without ceremony. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun beneath a worn baseball cap. Brown eyes scanning the tarmac with the focused gaze of someone perpetually calculating distances and wind speeds. The T-6 Texan II training prop plane waited alone at the far edge of the flight line, separated from the fifth-generation fighters as if by unspoken agreement. Its yellow and white paint scheme stood out garishly against the tactical gray of the combat aircraft, a relic from another era of aviation, despite being the Air Force's current training platform. "Looks like the kindergarten teacher showed up early," Lieutenant Aaron Walker muttered to his wingman as they passed, just loud enough to be heard. His flight suit, adorned with the Ghost Rider Squadron patch, was pressed to perfection. Olivia didn't acknowledge the comment. She'd heard variations of it for the past 3 years, ever since she'd been reassigned from combat operations to the Air Education and Training Command. The transition from F-16 pilot to instructor had been portrayed as a promotion, but everyone knew the truth. After the incident over the Persian Gulf, the brass wanted her experience without the liability of putting her in combat again. The T-6's propeller glinted in the sun as she ran her pre-flight check with methodical precision. Her fingers traced control surfaces and checked tension points with the certainty of someone who believed that attention to detail was the difference between life and death. Unlike the stealth fighters with their complex sensor arrays and computer-assisted systems, the T-6 was fundamentally analog, a machine that responded to human input rather than algorithmic calculations. In the main briefing room, Colonel James Harrington stood before a holographic display that showed real-time satellite imagery of the upcoming Red Flag exercise area. His square jaw and perfect posture matched his reputation as Nellis Air Force Base's rising star. "Gentlemen, today we're running the full combat simulation," Harrington announced, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone accustomed to command multiple threat environments, integrated air defense systems, and electronic warfare countermeasures. The F-22s will provide air superiority, while the F-35s handle ground target acquisition. Lieutenant Walker raised his hand. "Sir, is that prop plane scheduled for the exercise?" "Seems like bringing a knife to a drone fight." Laughter rippled through the room. Harrington smiled thinly. "The T-6 will be observing from the perimeter. Major Mitchell is evaluating training protocols for the new pilot candidates." More chuckles followed. The implication was clear: Olivia was a glorified babysitter watching the real pilots work. "With all due respect, sir," Walker continued, "wouldn't it make more sense to have her observe from the simulator? That antique will barely keep up with our holding patterns." Harrington's smile tightened. "The decisions about training evaluation were made at command level, Lieutenant. We'll accommodate accordingly." What none of them knew, what none of them had bothered to check, was that the antique had been modified under Olivia's supervision. The T-6's engine had been tuned for high-altitude performance, its control surfaces adjusted for enhanced maneuverability, and its cockpit equipped with specialized observation equipment that could track and record aircraft performance metrics in real time. It wasn't stealth, and it wasn't supersonic, but it was perfectly suited to its actual purpose: evaluating pilot skill when stripped of technological advantages. After the briefing, Olivia made her way to the operations desk to collect her mission parameters. The duty officer, Technical Sergeant Rivera, slid a thin folder across the counter without making eye contact. "That's it?" Olivia asked, opening the folder to find a single page of basic coordinates and altitude restrictions. Rivera shrugged. "Colonel says you're observing only. Stay above 15,000 feet and outside the engagement envelope." He glanced toward the window where the F-22s were being prepped for flight. "The real action will be happening lower." Olivia tucked the folder under her arm without comment. As she turned to leave, she almost collided with Captain Sarah Chun, one of the few female F-35 pilots on base. "Sorry, ma'am," Chun said, stepping back quickly. There was genuine respect in her voice, unlike most of the fighter jocks. "I heard you're flying today." "Just observing," Olivia replied. Chun glanced around before lowering her voice. "Some of us haven't forgotten your call sign, ma'am, before the incident. Before 3 years of flying a trainer instead of a fighter. Before becoming the cautionary tale told to ambitious pilots about the dangers of intuition over technology." "That was a long time ago, Captain." "Still," Chun insisted, 4 confirmed kills in under 2 minutes is 4 confirmed kills, electronic warfare suite failure or not. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Olivia nodded once, appreciating the recognition but unwilling to dwell on it. "Good hunting today, Captain." As she walked across the tarmac toward her aircraft, the conversation with Chun stirred memories she usually kept carefully compartmentalized. The dogfight over the Persian Gulf had been a cascading failure of technology. Radar jamming had disabled the F-16's targeting systems. Communications were compromised, and the heads-up display had gone dark. 4 enemy aircraft had approached from multiple vectors, expecting an easy kill against a blinded American fighter. What they hadn't expected was a pilot who had spent thousands of hours practicing visual acquisition and manual targeting. Olivia had engaged and eliminated all 4 threats using only basic instrumentation and the Mark I eyeball of feet that had simultaneously earned her the callsign Phoenix and ended her combat career when the higher-ups realized she had disengaged the remaining electronic systems to gain better control of the aircraft. The official citation praised her resourcefulness while the unofficial reprimand questioned her judgment in abandoning superior technological systems. Chief Master Sergeant Diego Ramirez was waiting beside the T-6 when she arrived, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. Ramirez had been maintaining military aircraft since Desert Storm, and he was one of the few people who treated Olivia with genuine respect. "She's ready to go, Major," he said, patting the aircraft's fuselage affectionately. "I installed that modified barometric sensor you wanted. Should give you better readings at the higher altitudes." "Thanks, Chief. Any word on the weather?" Ramirez glanced at the clear blue sky. "Perfect day for flying if you're above 20,000 feet. They're reporting unusual wind shear conditions in the exercise area, particularly around the mountain ranges. The F-22 pilots aren't concerned. Their fly-by-wire systems will compensate automatically." Olivia nodded, making a mental note. Wind shear at specific altitudes could create interesting challenges, especially if the automated systems weren't calibrated for localized conditions. "Did you check the stick tension like I asked?" "Yes, ma'am. Adjusted exactly to your specifications. Tighter than standard but responsive in the fingertips. Just like you like it." Ramirez lowered his voice. "I also loaded that special recording equipment you requested. It's integrated with the altimeter and airspeed indicator. We'll capture everything just like you wanted." "I appreciate it, Chief. Can I ask what you're looking for up there?" "Ma'am, this isn't standard observation equipment." Olivia secured her flight helmet under her arm. "Just gathering data, Chief, for the training program." Ramirez didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. "Well, whatever you're doing, that call sign patch on your flight suit says you know what you're about. The patch in question was subdued, almost invisible against the olive drab of her flight suit, a simple silhouette of a phoenix rising from flames with her calcine beneath it. Unlike the gaudy, colorful patches favored by many fighter pilots, Olivia's was deliberately understated. Those who knew what it represented didn't need bright colors to remember. Across the tarmac, the F-22 and F-35 pilots were conducting their pre-flight checks with tablets and diagnostic computers. Every system was being verified by software, every parameter confirmed by digital readouts. The contrast between their high-tech preparation and Olivia's hands-on approach couldn't have been more stark. Lieutenant Walker noticed her watching and nudged his wingman. "Check it out. She's actually using a paper checklist. Probably has a slide rule in the cockpit too." His wingman, Lieutenant Rodriguez, laughed. "Maybe we should offer her a compass and sextant to help with navigation." Olivia turned away, focusing on her aircraft. Their mockery was based on ignorance. They had never known what it was like to fly without the support systems they took for granted. They had never experienced the pure, unfiltered connection between pilot and aircraft that came from manual control. Most importantly, they had never faced a situation where the technology they depended on simply stopped working. As the morning progressed, the temperature continued to rise, creating heat mirages across the tarmac. The exercise briefing had been updated to include additional complexity. Simulated enemy air defenses had been enhanced, and the engagement zone had been expanded to include terrain that would challenge even the most advanced radar systems. Colonel Harrington conducted the final briefing with his usual polish, standing before a three-dimensional holographic display that showed every aspect of the upcoming mission. Aircraft assignments, engagement parameters, and success criteria were outlined in meticulous detail. "The objective is clear," Harrington concluded. "Demonstrate complete air dominance through integrated electronic warfare and stealth capabilities. Our F-22s and F-35s represent the pinnacle of American air power, unstoppable, undetectable, and undefeated." He glanced toward Olivia, who sat quietly in the back row. "Major Mitchell will be observing from outside the primary engagement zone. Her feedback on pilot performance will be incorporated into future training scenarios." The dismissive tone wasn't lost on anyone. Olivia was tolerated, not respected, included as a formality rather than a valuable participant. What none of them realized was that her presence served a purpose beyond mere observation. After the briefing, as pilots dispersed to their aircraft, Captain Chun fell into step beside Olivia. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Always, Captain. Some of us think it's wrong, the way they've sidelined you. 4 kills with manual systems should have made you a legend, not—" She trailed off, uncomfortable with completing the thought. "Not a cautionary tale?" Olivia finished for her. Chun nodded. "The younger pilots, they don't even know what you did. They just see the prop plane and make assumptions. Assumptions are comfortable, Captain. Reality is more complicated." "Is that why you requested this observation role? To show them the reality?" Olivia stopped walking, studying Chun carefully. "What makes you think I requested it?" "My roommate works in the colonel's office. She mentioned you specifically. Asked to participate in today's exercise with that particular aircraft. I just wondered why." For a moment, Olivia considered sharing her actual purpose, but operational security prevailed. "Let's just say I believe in maintaining certain skills that don't show up in simulator programs." Chun seemed to understand. "Well, good luck up there, Phoenix." She emphasized the calcine with genuine respect before hurrying to catch up with her squadron. As noon approached, the flight line became a carefully choreographed dance of final preparations. Ground crews conducted last-minute checks while pilots received updated weather and intelligence briefings. The F-22s, with their distinctive angular silhouettes, were positioned for first launch, followed by the marginally more rounded F-35s, the T-6 Texan II, with its single propeller and traditional flight surfaces, seemed almost comically out of place among the advanced jets like a vintage car at a spacecraft convention. Yet there was an elegant simplicity to its design, a directness of purpose that the stealth fighters, for all their sophistication, couldn't match. Olivia completed her pre-flight walk-around with practiced efficiency, checking control surfaces, inspecting the propeller, and verifying fuel levels personally rather than trusting computerized readings. Each action was deliberate, each verification manual, a stark contrast to the automated pre-flight routines of the fighter pilots. As she climbed into the cockpit, she noticed Lieutenant Walker watching her from beside his F-22. He said something to his companions that made them laugh, then pantomimed cranking an old-fashioned airplane starter. The mockery was juvenile, but revealing it demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of what made a good pilot. The T-6's cockpit was Spartan compared to the glass displays and touch interfaces of the fighters. Analog gauges showed altitude, airspeed, and engine performance. The control stick provided direct feedback without computer interpretation. Every adjustment, every correction would come directly from Olivia's hands, rather than being mediated by flight control computers. She initiated the startup sequence methodically, feeling the propeller engine catch and settle into a steady rhythm. There was something deeply satisfying about the direct connection between throttle movement and engine response. No delay, no electronic interpretation, just mechanical certainty. Nellis Tower, Trainer 27, request taxi for departure, she radioed, using the designation assigned for the exercise rather than her call sign. Trainer 27, Nellis Tower, cleared to taxi to runway 03 left, hold short for fighter. Departure sequence. Cleared to taxi, holding short, Trainer 27. As she taxied the aircraft toward the runway, Olivia could see the F-22s beginning their own movement, their powerful engines emitting a distinctive high-pitched whine that contrasted sharply with the T-6's propeller drone. The technological gap between the aircraft was measured in decade stealth materials versus painted aluminum, thrust vectoring versus fixed propellers, augmented reality displays versus analog gauges. Yet as she settled into position to wait for takeoff clearance, Olivia felt a calm certainty that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with skill. Today's exercise would test more than just the capabilities of America's most advanced fighter aircraft. It would test assumptions about what made a pilot effective when conditions didn't match the programming. The tower's voice crackled over the radio. Raptor flight cleared for takeoff, runway 03 left, wind 50 at 12 knots. Colonel Harrington's F-22 accelerated down the runway with impressive force, lifting smoothly into the Nevada sky with its distinctive twin tails silhouetted against the blue. The other Raptors followed in precise intervals, their formations tightening as they climbed toward the exercise area. Next came the F-35s, marginally slower off the line but climbing aggressively to join the aerial armada. Captain Chun's aircraft was third in the sequence, executing a perfect departure that spoke to her skill regardless of the technology supporting her. Finally, after all 12 advanced fighters were airborne, the tower addressed Olivia. Trainer 27, cleared for takeoff, runway 03 left, wind now 060 at 14 knots, gusting 18. Cleared for takeoff, Trainer 27. The T-6 accelerated more gradually than the jets, its propeller biting into the desert air with steady determination. Olivia felt the precise moment when the wings generated sufficient lift, easing the control stick back with practiced precision to lift the aircraft smoothly from the runway. There was no computer assistance, no fly-by-wire system to smooth out imperfections, just the direct translation of her commands into aircraft movement. As she established her climb, she could hear the fighter pilots chattering on the tactical frequency, their conversations filled with technical jargon about sensor integration and electronic warfare capabilities. They were preparing to engage in a carefully choreographed ballet of technology, where success would be measured by targeting solutions and simulated kill ratios. Raptor lead to all fighters, proceed to exercise Area Bravo, maintain Angels 25. Prepare for first engagement sequence. Colonel Harrington's voice was confident, commanding. Lightning flight copies, moving to support position. Olivia switched to the observation frequency, officially separate from the tactical channel. Trainer 27 established at Angels. 17, proceeding to observation point Charlie. Copy Trainer 27, maintain position outside the engagement envelope. As she leveled off at 17,000 feet, Olivia could see the fighter formation spreading out below her, their metallic skins catching the sun as they maneuvered into attack positions. From her higher vantage point, she had an excellent view of the entire exercise area, including the mountain ranges where unusual wind conditions had been reported. She activated the specialized recording equipment Chief Ramirez had installed, ensuring that every maneuver, every altitude change, and every radio transmission would be captured for later analysis. What she was gathering wasn't just observation. Data for training purposes, it was evidence. Below her, the exercise began in earnest. The F-22s executed a flawless pincer movement against simulated enemy aircraft, their stealth capabilities allowing them to approach undetected before firing. Virtual missiles from beyond visual range. The F-35s followed up with simulated strikes against ground targets, their sensor fusion systems identifying and prioritizing objectives with impressive efficiency. It was textbook execution of modern air warfare doctrine technology multiplying. The effectiveness of pilots through superior information processing and weapons delivery. To the casual observer, it would appear to be a perfect demonstration of American air dominance. But Olivia wasn't a casual observer. As she watched the exercise unfold, she noticed subtle patterns that would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. The fighters were maintaining rigid adherence to program tactics, their movements predictable to anyone familiar with their operational parameters. More importantly, they were completely dependent on their technology working exactly as designed. Lieutenant Walker's voice came over the tactical frequency, confident to the point of arrogance. Ghost 2, radar shows multiple bandits at bearing 270, Angels 22, moving to intercept. Copy Ghost 2. Sensor fusion confirms targets. Weapons solution in 5 seconds. It was impressive coordination, or would have been if it weren't. Completely dependent on systems that could be compromised. Olivia made notes on a kneeboard, old-school pilot style, recording observations that wouldn't be captured by the electronic systems. As the exercise progressed into its second hour, the wind conditions around the mountain ranges began to change. What had been moderate gusting was developing into significant wind shear, creating turbulence that the automated systems would need to compensate for. Lightning 3 to control, experiencing unusual buffeting near the northwestern ridge. Systems are compensating, but it's getting choppy. Copy Lightning 3. Weather is reporting increased wind activity. Your aircraft's flight control system should handle it automatically. Olivia's T-6, lacking sophisticated flight control computers, experienced the same turbulence more directly. She felt each gust through the control stick, adjusting manually, with small, precise movements that kept the aircraft stable without overcorrecting. It was the kind of flying that required constant attention and skill rather than programming. She keyed her microphone. Trainer 27 to control. I'm showing significant wind shear developing around the mountain peaks. Vertical displacement. Up to 1,000 feet in some areas. There was a pause before control responded. Copy Trainer. Weather systems are tracking it. Fighter groups have been notified. What control didn't say, what they might not have even realized, was that the rapidly changing wind conditions were creating a scenario that automated systems might struggle to interpret correctly. Predictive algorithms worked well with stable, patterns but could lag during chaotic, rapidly changing conditions. Sure enough, within minutes, the first signs of trouble appeared. Ghost 4 to lead, my targeting system just glitched. Recalibrating now. Lightning 2 experiencing momentary flight control anomaly, resetting to primary mode. Colonel Harrington's voice remained calm. All aircraft, maintain formation integrity. These are minor technical issues. Your backup systems will compensate. Olivia watched as the previously precise formations began to show subtle signs of disorganization. The fighters were still flying well, but their movements had become more hesitant, with more frequent course corrections as their automated systems struggled to maintain optimal performance in the deteriorating conditions. The real test came 20 minutes later when the exercise scenario shifted to Phase 2, simulated enemy electronic countermeasures. In a real combat environment, this would mean jamming, spoofing, and other techniques designed to degrade technological advantages. For training purposes, it meant certain systems would be deliberately degraded to test pilot response. All fighters commence electronic warfare scenario. Simulated radar jamming and GPS denial is now in effect. The change was immediately visible from Olivia's vantage point. The fighters' formerly precise movements became more erratic as they dealt with compromised information. Some pilots compensated better than others, but all showed signs of dependency on systems that were no longer fully reliable. Lieutenant Walker's voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Ghost 2 to lead, having trouble maintaining situational awareness with degraded systems. Targeting solution is unstable. Maintain discipline, Ghost 2, Harrington responded. Fall back on your training. The aircraft knows what to do even with partial information. That was the critical assumption, that the aircraft, with its sophisticated programming, could overcome information deficits better than a human pilot could. It was an assumption Olivia had questioned ever since the Persian Gulf incident, and one she was now positioned to test. As the electronic warfare scenario intensified, combined with the increasingly turbulent weather conditions, the exercise began to transform from a demonstration of technological superiority into a stress test of pilot adaptability. The fighters were still flying, still engaging targets, but with decreasing effectiveness and growing hesitation. Olivia continued to circle above the exercise area, recording everything with both the specialized equipment and her own notes. The T-6, with its simple systems and direct controls, was ironically less affected by the challenging conditions than the advanced fighters. Without complex electronics to be jammed or confused, and with direct manual control rather than computer interpretation, she maintained steady flight while watching the technological marvels below struggle with conflicting information. The situation deteriorated further when the third phase of the exercise began simulated pop-up threats from unexpected vectors. Under normal conditions, the fighter's sensor arrays would have detected and categorized these threats instantly, allowing for automated countermeasures and optimized evasion tactics. Under degraded conditions, with compromised systems and difficult weather, the response was far less impressive. Multiple new threats detected. Captain Chun called out, her voice tense. Systems are having trouble classifying and prioritizing. All fighters, defensive spread, Harrington ordered. Rely on visual confirmation when possible. What followed was revealing pilots trained primarily on technological systems struggled when forced to rely on basic airmanship. Their maneuvers became conservative, their formations loose, their targeting inconsistent. They were still effective, still professional, but the degradation in performance was noticeable to anyone with the experience to recognize it. From her position above the exercise, Olivia could see the entire scenario unfolding like a tactical map. She could identify opportunities the fighters were missing, patterns they were failing to exploit, and weaknesses in their approach that a less technology-dependent strategy might have avoided. The exercise reached its climax when Control introduced the final challenge, Simulated emergency requiring immediate response without preparation. In this case, a simulated engine failure in Lieutenant Walker's F-22. Ghost 2, this is control. Simulate engine failure, right power plant. Execute emergency procedures. Walker's response was textbook but revealed an underlying dependency. Ghost 2 copies. Initiating emergency protocol Alpha. System is calculating optimal glide path. And recovery airfield. Olivia watched as Walker's F-22 began a controlled descent, its flight path clearly being determined more by the aircraft's emergency programming than by pilot decision-making. It was effective but inflexible. The computer was flying a predetermined pattern rather than adapting to the specific conditions. What happened next wasn't part of the exercise plan. A particularly severe wind shear, exactly the kind that had been developing around the mountain ridges, caught Walker's descending F-22 at precisely the wrong moment. The aircraft, already simulating reduced power and with its attention divided between multiple emergency systems, suddenly rolled 30 degrees off axis. Ghost 2 experiencing significant control issues. Walker's voice had lost all its earlier bravado. Automated recovery is not responding correctly. The F-22's flight control computers, confronted with contradictory inputs from both the simulated emergency and the real wind shear, entered a mode confusion state, a rare but serious condition where automated systems essentially become paralyzed by conflicting priorities. Switch to manual backup, Harrington ordered. Override the automation. I'm trying, Walker responded, his stress evident. The system is fighting me. It thinks it knows the correct recovery path, but it's wrong. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia. The pilot was literally fighting his own aircraft, or more precisely, fighting the sophisticated computers that were supposed to make flying safer and more effective. The technology designed to support had become an impediment. Without hesitation, she keyed her microphone. Ghost 2, this is Trainer 27. Your automated systems are in mode confusion. You need to force manual override and fly the aircraft, not the computer. There was a moment of stunned silence on the frequency. The observation aircraft wasn't supposed to be providing tactical advice to exercise participants. Trainer 27, this is Control. Maintain observation protocols. Olivia ignored the reprimand. Ghost 2, reduce your dependence on the automated recovery. Use basic stick and rudder. Feel the aircraft. Walker's response was tense. Easy for you to say in that museum piece. This is a little more complicated than turning a propeller. Despite his dismissive tone, Olivia could see his F-22 beginning to stabilize as he wrestled control away from the confused automated systems. The recovery wasn't elegant. It lacked the precision that the computers would have provided under optimal conditions, but it was effective. That's it, she encouraged. Fly the plane, not the computer. As Walker regained control and established a stable descent path, Colonel Harrington's voice came over the frequency, tight with contained anger. Trainer 27, return to base immediately. Your participation in this exercise is terminated. Copy that, Control. Returning to base. As Olivia banked the T-6 toward Nellis, she felt neither victory nor vindication. What she had witnessed wasn't a failure of technology per se, but rather a failure of dependency pilots, who had become so reliant on automated systems that their basic airmanship had atrophied. It was exactly what she had been assigned to evaluate, and exactly what her recording equipment had documented in detail. The return flight was smooth and uneventful, the T-6 responding precisely to her inputs without the need for computer interpretation. As she approached the runway, she could see a vehicle waiting beside the taxiway, the distinctive staff car used by the base commander, General Victor Reynolds. After landing and taxiing to her assigned spot, Olivia completed her shutdown checklist. With the same methodical precision she had demonstrated throughout the day, By the time she climbed down from the cockpit, both General Reynolds and Colonel Harrington were waiting, their expressions suggesting very different interpretations of the day's events. "Major Mitchell," Reynolds said, without preamble. "I understand. There was an incident during the exercise." "Yes, sir." "Lieutenant Walker experienced a system conflict during a simulated emergency. I provided assistance." Harrington's jaw tightened. "You interfered with a controlled training scenario. Major, you exceeded your observation mandate and undermined the chain of command." "With respect, Colonel, I prevented a potential loss of aircraft. The F-22's automated systems were in mode confusion, and Lieutenant Walker was struggling to regain control." "That's not your determination to make," Harrington insisted. "The F-22's recovery protocols were actively making the situation worse." Olivia interrupted, addressing her. Response to General Reynolds rather than Harrington. "Sir, the recording equipment documented the entire sequence. The automated systems were prioritizing the simulated emergency over the real wind shear condition, creating a dangerous control conflict." Reynolds studied her with narrowed eyes. "You installed recording equipment on the T-6? "Yes, sir. As authorized under Training Evaluation Directive 39B, my current assignment includes assessing pilot dependency on automated systems during stressed operations." "You never mentioned this assignment to me," Harrington said, his voice cold. "The directive came directly from Air Combat Command, Colonel," Reynolds replied before Olivia could respond. "Major Mitchell has been conducting an independent evaluation of our fighter training protocols for the past 3 months." The revelation clearly caught Harrington by surprise. "An evaluation of my pilots?" "Not just your pilots, Colonel. Similar evaluations are being conducted at 5 other bases." Reynolds turned back to Olivia. "I assume today's exercise provided relevant data for your assessment." "Yes, sir. Comprehensive data on pilot response when automated systems become confused or compromised." "Which almost never happens," Harrington interjected. "Our systems are redundant, self-monitoring, and designed to handle far more complex situations than a bit of wind shear." "And yet," Reynolds said quietly, "Lieutenant Walker was unable to maintain control without Major Mitchell's intervention." "That seems like precisely the kind of scenario her evaluation was designed to identify." As the implications of this exchange became clear, Olivia noticed other pilots gathering nearby, including Lieutenant Walker and Captain Chun. Their expressions ranged from confusion to curiosity to, in Walker's case, poorly concealed embarrassment. "Perhaps," Reynolds continued, "this would be a good opportunity for Major Mitchell to explain the purpose of her evaluation project, particularly since today's events seem to validate her concerns." Harrington looked like he wanted to object but maintained professional silence. Reynolds nodded to Olivia. "Major, if you would." Olivia stood straighter, aware that her next words would challenge fundamental assumptions about modern fighter operations. 3 years ago, after the Persian Gulf incident, Air Combat Command began questioning whether our increasing reliance on automated systems was creating a generation of pilots who manage computers rather than fly aircraft. My assignment has been to evaluate that concern across multiple bases and training scenarios. She gestured toward the T-6. This aircraft wasn't chosen because it's obsolete, but because it's pure. It requires direct pilot input without computer interpretation. It forces the pilot to feel the air, read the environment, and make real-time adjustments based on experience rather than algorithms. Walker stepped forward, his earlier mockery replaced by reluctant respect. "You're saying we're too dependent on our technology." "I'm saying there's a difference between using technology and being used by it," Olivia clarified. Today's exercise demonstrated what happens when pilots trust systems more than instincts, when automated responses replace learned skill, and when the interface between human and machine becomes a barrier rather than a connection. She turned back to General Reynolds. The recording equipment documented exactly what we suspected, sir. Under stressed conditions with degraded system performance, pilot effectiveness decreased dramatically. Basic airmanship errors that wouldn't have occurred in previous generations became common. Dependency had replaced capability. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. And your recommendation? A fundamental rebalancing of our training protocols. More emphasis on manual flying skills, more practice with degraded systems, and more scenarios that force pilots to fly the aircraft rather than manage the computers. Harrington finally found his voice again. General, with all due respect, our training produces the finest fighter pilots in the world. Our technological edge is what makes American air power dominant. Technology doesn't make pilots, Colonel. Olivia countered. It makes options. When the technology fails, and it will fail, especially against advanced adversaries with electronic warfare capabilities, the only thing standing between success and disaster is the pilot's fundamental flying skill. As this exchange continued, Olivia noticed that Lieutenant Walker had moved closer to the T-6, examining it with new interest. His eyes fell on the Phoenix patch on her flight suit, and his expression changed as recognition dawned. "Your Phoenix," he said, loud enough for the others to hear. 4 kills, manual targeting, Persian Gulf. It wasn't a question but a statement of belated recognition. The name rippled through the gathered pilots. Phoenix wasn't just a calcine, it was a legend. A story told in pilot training about the last purely visual dogfight in modern combat. History. Most had assumed it was exaggerated or mythologized. Few had connected it to the quiet major who flew a trainer aircraft. General Reynolds smiled slightly. "I was wondering when someone would notice. Yes, Major Mitchell is indeed Phoenix. The incident that some viewed as a failure of judgment, others recognized as an extraordinary demonstration of fundamental pilot skill, which is precisely why she was selected to lead this evaluation program." The revelation transformed the dynamic among the gathered pilots. What had been dismissive curiosity became something closer to respect, or at least reassessment. The woman they had mocked for flying a prop plane had outperformed their most advanced fighters without a single piece of modern technology. "The calcine isn't what matters," Olivia said firmly. "What matters is that we're creating pilots who can fly with technology but aren't defined by it. Pilots who understand that systems are tools, not crutches." Walker cleared his throat. "Major, I owe you an apology. And probably thanks as well. I'm not sure I would have regained control without your guidance." "You would have," Olivia assured him. "You're a good pilot, Lieutenant. You just need to trust your hands more than your displays." General Reynolds surveyed the group, clearly satisfied with how the situation had developed. "Colonel Harrington, effective immediately. I want Major Mitchell's evaluation findings incorporated into our training protocols. Every pilot in this squadron will spend a minimum of 10 hours in the T-6, flying manual patterns without computer assistance." Harrington looked like he might object but instead nodded curtly. "Yes, sir." "Furthermore," Reynolds continued, "Major Mitchell will conduct specialized training sessions on manual recovery techniques during system failures. These will be mandatory for all combat pilots." As the implications of these directives sank in, Olivia found herself the center of attention rather than the marginalized observer. The journey from combat pilot to instructor to evaluator had been circuitous, but it had led to this moment, a chance to reshape training philosophies that had drifted too far toward technological dependency. Captain Chun approached, offering a hand. "It's an honor, ma'am. The Phoenix story got me through some rough patches in flight school. It's just a story, Captain. The reality was messy, eh?" "Reality usually is," Chun agreed. "But some of us needed to hear that technology isn't everything. That skill still matters." As the group dispersed, with pilots heading toward the debriefing room and maintenance personnel securing aircraft, Olivia remained beside the T-6. Its yellow paint seemed less garish now, more purposeful, a deliberate contrast to the tactical gray of fighters that depended on the debriefing room buzzed with tension as pilots gathered to review the day's exercise. They're flying like a single organism. Major Mitchell's approach is unorthodox but effective, Harrington admitted. They're developing a level of situational awareness I haven't seen in years. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. The question is whether these skills will translate back to their primary aircraft. Can they maintain this awareness when surrounded by screens and automated systems? That question would be answered the following week when Reynolds authorized a new exercise. One designed to test whether the manual training had improved overall combat effectiveness in their advanced fighters. The scenario was challenging, a simulated enemy force with sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities that would degrade or compromise automated systems at unpredictable intervals. Pilots would need to seamlessly transition between full technological support and basic manual control as conditions changed. The morning of the exercise brought an unexpected complication, a weather system moving in from the northwest, bringing with it moderate turbulence and reduced visibility in parts of the training area. Meteorology predicted conditions would remain within safety parameters but warned of localized wind shear similar to what had caused Walker's difficulties during the previous exercise. Colonel Harrington convened the pre-mission briefing with a directness that reflected his evolving leadership style. Weather is marginal but acceptable. The exercise will proceed with additional safety protocols in effect. Major Mitchell will provide real-time assessment of weather conditions as they develop. Olivia, once again assigned to the T-6 observation role, reviewed the weather data carefully. The conditions will actually enhance the training value, she noted. Real combat rarely happens in perfect weather. The turbulence will stress both your automated systems and your manual flying skills. The pilots nodded, no longer dismissive of her input. Over the past week, they had come to respect both her expertise and her calcine's legacy. Lieutenant Walker would lead the first engagement sequence, commanding a 4-ship formation of F-22s against simulated enemy aircraft. Captain Chun would lead the F-35 component, focusing on ground targets while managing the shifting electronic warfare environment. As they prepared to depart, Olivia conducted her pre-flight walk-around with the same methodical precision she always demonstrated. Chief Ramirez watched with approval. "They're watching you, you know," he said quietly. "Copying your inspection technique, your checklist discipline, even the way you climb into the cockpit." "Good," Olivia replied simply. "Those details matter." Once airborne, the difference in the fighter's performance was immediately apparent. Where the previous exercise had shown rigid adherence to programmed tactics, today's formations demonstrated fluid adaptability. Pilots transitioned smoothly between automated and manual control as electronic warfare effects came and went, maintaining combat effectiveness throughout. Ghost lead to formation, sensors indicating jamming attempt at our 3 o'clock, Walker reported calmly. Switching to visual acquisition while systems recalibrate. Copy Ghost lead. Formation tightening for visual mutual support. Olivia circled above in the T-6, recording both data and observations as the exercise progressed. The improvement wasn't just in how they handled system degradation. It was in their overall situational awareness, their tactical coordination, and their confidence during challenging conditions. When the simulated enemy forces initiated their primary electronic attack, temporarily blinding several key systems on the F-22s and F-35s, the squadron responded not with confusion but with practiced competence. They adjusted their tactics, maintained formation integrity, and continued to prosecute their objectives, using fundamental flying skills to compensate for technological limitations. Lightning III losing targeting data, Captain Chun reported. During a particularly intense jamming sequence, Switching to manual weapons delivery mode. Copy Lightning 3. Ghost 2 will provide visual confirmation of target. This seamless integration of high and low technology, of advanced systems and basic airmanship, represented exactly what Olivia's training program had been designed to achieve. Pilots who could use every tool available without becoming dependent on any single system. As the exercise entered its final phase, the weather deteriorated more rapidly than predicted. The wind shear around the mountain ridges intensified, creating challenging conditions even for the most sophisticated flight. Control systems. All aircraft, be advised, Control announced. Weather reporting significant wind shear developing in sectors 4 and 6. Exercise parameters remain valid but use caution near terrain features. Olivia monitoring both the weather and the courtier. Fighter's performance. Noticed a particular cloud formation developing that indicated potentially dangerous rotational air currents, the kind that automated systems often misinterpreted. Control, this is Trainer 27. I'm observing potential rotor cloud formation near the northern ridge. Recommend fighters maintain minimum 3,000-foot separation from that feature. Copy Trainer. All fighters acknowledge minimum separation. Requirement from northern ridge. Unlike the previous exercise, there was no dismissal of her observation, no questioning of her judgment. The squadron had learned that experience sometimes perceived what sensors missed. The exercise concluded without incident, despite the challenging conditions. Every aircraft returned safely, every objective was accomplished, and the overall performance metrics showed significant improvement compared to the previous week's results. During the debriefing, General Reynolds presented the comparative data. That confirmed what everyone had already sensed. The squadron had achieved its highest combat effectiveness rating in 3 years. The numbers tell the story, Reynolds said, gesturing to the main display. 72% effectiveness during system degradation, compared to 39% before Major Mitchell's training program. Target acquisition maintained at 65% during electronic attack, up from 28% previously. He turned to face the assembled pilots. But the most important metric isn't on this chart. It's the confidence you displayed when your technology was compromised. That can't be quantified, but it was evident in every aspect of today's exercise. Colonel Harrington nodded in agreement. We've rediscovered something essential about what makes a fighter pilot effective. It isn't the aircraft, the weapons, or the sensors, though all those things matter. It's the judgment, skill, and adaptability of the person in the cockpit. Olivia remained quiet, letting the results speak for themselves. Her goal had never been recognition or vindication, but rather a fundamental change in how pilots were trained, a rebalancing of technology and human skill that would make American air power more resilient in the face of evolving threats. After the debriefing, as pilots dispersed to their quarters or the officers' club to celebrate the successful exercise, Lieutenant Walker approached Olivia once more. I owe you another apology, he said. When you first arrived with that prop plane, I thought you were a relic. Someone the Air Force didn't know what to do with, so they stuck you in a training role. And now? Olivia asked. Now I understand that flying isn't about the aircraft or its capabilities. It's about the connection between pilot and machine. He gestured toward the flight line where both the advanced fighters and the T-6 trainers sat side by side. The best technology in the world is useless without the skill to use it properly, and sometimes to know when not to use it at all. Captain Chun joined them, her expression serious. Major, there's something I've been wondering. After the Persian Gulf incident, when they grounded you from combat operations, you could have fought it. Your record would have supported an appeal. Why didn't you? Olivia considered the question carefully. It touched on decisions she had made years ago, choices that had shaped her career in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Because sometimes the mission is bigger than personal ambition, she said finally. I realized I could have more impact, changing how we train pilots than by continuing to fly combat missions myself. Was it worth it? Walker asked. Olivia looked out across the flight line, where a new generation of pilots was learning to balance technology with fundamental skill. Automated systems with human judgment. Ask me again in 5 years when you're facing a real adversary with advanced electronic warfare capabilities. If what you learned here helps bring you home safely, then yes, it was worth everything. The following morning, Olivia arrived. At the flight line to find General Reynolds waiting beside her T-6. The aircraft had been slightly modified overnight. Freshly painted on the tail was a small phoenix emblem, rising from stylized flames. Hope you don't mind, Reynolds said, gesturing to the new marking. The maintenance crew thought it was appropriate. This aircraft may be simpler than our fighters, but it's proven just as valuable in its own way. Thank you, sir. It's fitting. Reynolds handed her a folder stamped with classified markings. Your evaluation program has been approved for implementation across all Air Combat Command training units. The Pentagon was particularly impressed with the performance. Metrics from yesterday's exercise. Olivia accepted the folder, understanding its significance. What had begun as a limited assessment following her Persian Gulf experience had evolved into a fundamental shift in fighter pilot training philosophy. There's more, Reynolds continued. Your new assignment, if you choose to accept it. Air Education and Training Command wants you to develop a comprehensive integration program, bridging the gap between manual flying skills and advanced systems operation. Full curriculum development, implementation oversight, the works. And if I don't accept? Reynolds smiled slightly. Then you can return to combat operations. Your flight status has been fully reinstated. The Air Force needs good pilots in the cockpit too. The choice was unexpected but clarifying. Olivia had spent 3 years proving that fundamental flying skills remained essential even in an era of technological marvels. Now she had the opportunity to institutionalize that philosophy, to ensure that future generations of pilots would never lose the connection between human and machine that defined true airmanship. I'll take the training command, sir. Reynolds nodded, clearly having anticipated her answer. I thought you might. Some calsigns are earned in combat, Major. Yours was. But sometimes the greater service happens after the fighting stops, when you pass on what you've learned to those who come after. As they walked toward the briefing room where the day's training schedule would be organized, Olivia glanced back at the T-6 with its new Phoenix emblem. The aircraft that had been mocked as obsolete had proven to be the perfect teaching tool, a reminder that in aviation, as in life, the fundamentals never truly became outdated. The prop plane that had once been a symbol of her marginalization had become the centerpiece of a training revolution, its simplicity revealing truths about pilot skill that the most advanced fighters had obscured. And the calsign that had once been whispered as a cautionary tale was now spoken with respect, not for the combat action that had earned it, but for the wisdom it now represented. Phoenix, Reynolds said, following her gaze to the aircraft. Rebirth from the ashes. Seems like that applies to more than just your calsign. Yes, sir, Olivia agreed. To an entire approach to training. Sometimes you have to strip away the complexity to rediscover what matters most. As new pilots arrived for the day's instruction, many of them glancing with newfound respect at both Olivia and the T-6, she recognized that her journey had come full circle. The skills that had once saved her in combat were now being passed to a new generation, ensuring that American air power would remain effective not just through technological superiority, but through the irreplaceable human element that no computer could replicate. The prop plane they had laughed at had become the symbol of a training philosophy that would shape combat aviation for decades to come. And the calsign they had dismissed had become the standard to which they now aspired, not just skilled pilots, but complete aviators who understood that true mastery came from balance between technology and fundamental human skill. 6 months later, the transformation at Nellis Air Force Base had become the subject of intense interest throughout the military aviation community. What had begun as a localized training experiment under Major Olivia Phoenix Mitchell had evolved into a fundamental reassessment of fighter pilot development across the entire Air Force. The integration program she had designed, officially designated Balanced Airmanship Initiative, had spread to 3 additional bases with instructors specifically trained in her methodology. The distinctive yellow T-6 Texan II aircraft, once objects of mockery, were now in such demand that the Air Education and Training Command had authorized the reactivation of dozens from storage facilities. On a clear Tuesday morning, Olivia stood on the flight line watching a formation of 4 T-6s perform precision maneuvers above the desert landscape. The pilots controlling them weren't students, but veteran F-22 and F-35 instructors, undergoing certification in the new training protocols. "Impressive progress," observed Brigadier General Eleanor Caldwell, the newly appointed head of fighter training integration. 6 months ago, those same instructors couldn't have flown that formation without full avionics support. "They always had the capability," Olivia replied. "They just needed to rediscover it beneath layers of technological dependency." Caldwell nodded thoughtfully. "The Pentagon is watching this program very closely. Major, the performance metrics are undeniable. Pilots who complete your integration training show 30% better response during system degradation scenarios compared to traditional training graduates." What Caldwell didn't mention, because it remained classified, was that recent combat operations had validated Olivia's approach in the most meaningful way possible. 2 F-35 pilots deployed to Eastern Europe had successfully evaded sophisticated electronic attacks specifically because of their training in manual flight operations, bringing back critical intelligence despite nearly complete system failure. As they watched the formation complete its exercises, Chief Master Sergeant Ramirez approached with a tablet displaying the day's maintenance schedule. "Major, we've got the modified F-16s ready for Phase 2 testing. All 8 aircraft have the switchable avionics you specified, full capability or basic instrumentation with a single toggle." "Thank you, Chief. Let's schedule the first integrated flight for tomorrow morning." This was the next evolution of Olivia's program, specially modified frontline fighters that could transition between full technological support and basic instrumentation, allowing pilots to practice the critical transition between these modes during actual high-performance flight. "You're creating a new generation of fighter pilots," Caldwell noted as Ramirez departed. "Ones who can leverage technology without being limited by it. That's the goal, General. The best of both worlds. All the advantages of advanced systems, when they're working correctly, and the fundamental skills to continue the mission when they're not." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a staff car bearing Air Force distinctive markings. The vehicle stopped nearby, and a 4-star general emerged. General Victor Morris, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the service's highest-ranking officer. Olivia and Caldwell came to attention immediately, saluting as Morris approached. "At ease," he said, returning their salutes before focusing on Olivia. "Major Mitchell, I've been hearing a lot about your program. Thought I should see it firsthand before the congressional briefing next week. It's an honor, sir. We have a full demonstration scheduled for this afternoon, if you'd like to observe." Morris nodded. "I'll do more than observe, Major. I want to experience it myself. Been a while since I've flown without a glass cockpit full of displays, but I still remember the basics." This unexpected development sent ripples of activity through the base. The Air Force Chief of Staff personally participating in a training flight was unprecedented, and a powerful statement about the importance being placed on Olivia's program. Within 2 hours, A T-6 had been prepared for General Morris with Olivia scheduled to fly as his instructor. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The service's highest officer willingly placing himself in the position of student to a major who, just months earlier, had been considered marginalized. As they completed pre-flight checks, Morris studied the simple cockpit layout with something approaching nostalgia. Started my career in T-37s, you know. Not so different from this, though we thought we were high-tech back then. The principles haven't changed, sir, Olivia replied. Just the interfaces, Morris nodded thoughtfully. That's precisely what interests me about your approach. Major, you're not rejecting technology. You're putting it in its proper context as a tool, rather than a replacement for skill. Once airborne, Olivia guided Morris through a series of increasingly challenging maneuvers designed to emphasize the direct feedback between control inputs and aircraft response. The general, despite decades away from basic training aircraft, demonstrated the kind of instinctive adaptability that had marked his rise through the ranks. It comes back to you, he commented as they completed a particularly precise wingover. That feeling of the aircraft as an extension of yourself rather than a system to be managed. That's the foundation of the entire program, sir. We're not training pilots to fly without technology. We're training them to fly with or without it, depending on the circumstances. After landing, Morris remained in the cockpit for several minutes, reflecting on the experience. When he finally climbed down, his expression was resolute. Major Mitchell, I want this program expanded immediately. Every fighter squadron, every training unit. The budget implications are significant, but the combat readiness benefits justify the investment. Brigadier General Caldwell, who had been observing the flight, stepped forward. Sir, we've prepared an implementation plan for broader adoption. Major Mitchell has developed a scalable model that can be adapted to each command's specific requirements. Good. I want it on my desk by tomorrow. Morris turned back to Olivia. You've started something important here, Major. Something that will save lives and missions in the years ahead. As the general's staff car departed, Olivia found herself surrounded by instructors and pilots who had witnessed the unprecedented demonstration. Lieutenant Walker, now a certified instructor in the program, summed up the collective sentiment. When they laughed at your prop plane, did you ever imagine it would lead to this? Olivia smiled slightly. It was never about the aircraft, Lieutenant. It was about what it represented, the fundamental connection between pilot and machine that transcends technology. The following weeks brought rapid expansion of the program, with T-6 aircraft and modified fighters deployed to bases across the country. Olivia found herself traveling constantly, overseeing implementation and training new instructors in the methodology she had developed. At Andrews Air Force Base outside Washington, D.C., she met resistance from a squadron commander who viewed the program as a step backward from technological advancement. With all due respect, Major, Colonel Richard Blackwood argued during the initial briefing, my pilots are trained on the most advanced systems in the world. Asking them to practice with deliberately reduced capabilities seems counterproductive. Rather than debate the point theoretically, Olivia proposed a practical demonstration. A simple challenge, Colonel. Your best pilot against me. Full mission profile with simulated electronic attack. Your pilot uses all available technology. I'll fly with basic instrumentation only. The challenge, offered publicly, couldn't be refused without losing face. Blackwood selected his squadron's operations officer, Major David Prescott, a decorated combat pilot with over 2,000 hours in the F-35. The demonstration was scheduled for the following morning, with senior staff from the Pentagon observing. The scenario was straightforward but demanding. Penetrate defended airspace, acquire a specific target, and execute a simulated strike while facing sophisticated electronic countermeasures. Prescott would fly an F-35 with its full suite of stealth and electronic warfare capabilities. Olivia would fly a modified F-16 with its advanced systems deliberately disabled, leaving only basic flight instrumentation and manual weapons delivery systems. As they prepared for takeoff, Prescott approached Olivia on the flight line. "No hard feelings, Major. I respect what you're trying to do, but technology exists for a reason. It makes us more effective." "I don't disagree, Major," Olivia replied. "I just believe effectiveness comes from the pilot first, the technology second." Once airborne, the difference in their approaches became immediately apparent. Prescott utilized his F-35's sophisticated sensors to map the electronic environment, identifying threat emitters and planning a route that minimized exposure. It was technically perfect, leveraging every advantage the fifth-generation fighter offered. Olivia, flying the older F-16 without advanced systems, took a fundamentally different approach. Rather than trying to map the entire electronic battlefield, she focused on visual cues, terrain features, and the subtle indications of enemy activity that experienced pilots recognized instinctively. When the simulated electronic attack began, Prescott's advantages rapidly diminished. His comprehensive sensor picture became corrupted with false returns and spoofed signals. The automated threat avoidance system began suggesting contradictory evasion routes as it tried to process conflicting data. Olivia, already operating without these systems, experienced no such confusion. She continued her approach using terrain, masking and visual navigation, maintaining situational awareness through fundamental piloting skills rather than electronic assistance. The exercise controllers, monitoring both aircraft, provided running commentary for the observers. F-35 is experiencing significant electronic deception effects. Pilot is attempting to reset primary systems. Meanwhile, the F-16 continues on course without deviation. By the time they reached the target area, the contrast was stark. Prescott's F-35, despite its technological superiority, had been delayed and diverted by the electronic countermeasures. Olivia's F-16, flying a direct route without depending on vulnerable systems, arrived 3 minutes earlier and executed a perfect simulated strike. The debriefing that followed was subdued but respectful. Colonel Blackwood, to his credit, acknowledged the lesson without defensiveness. "Your point is well made, Major Mitchell. It's not about rejecting technology, it's about maintaining the skills to operate effectively when that technology is compromised." Prescott, after reviewing the mission data, offered his own assessment. "I was fighting my aircraft as much as the enemy, trying to make sense of corrupted data instead of trusting what I could see and feel." "That's precisely what the program addresses," Olivia explained. "We're not training pilots to fly without technology. We're training them to recognize when technology becomes a liability rather than an asset, and to transition seamlessly between modes of operation." By the end of the day, Andrews Air Force Base had become the 7th major installation to fully adopt the Balanced Airmanship Initiative. More significantly, Colonel Blackwood requested that Olivia conduct additional demonstrations for air combat command leadership, expanding the program's influence further up the chain of command. 3 weeks later, Olivia found herself in an unexpected setting, testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee about the implications of her training program for national defense. The hearing room was filled with military leaders, defense industry representatives, and members of Congress concerned with both military effectiveness and the substantial budgets allocated to fighter aircraft development. Senator Elizabeth Warren, the committee chairwoman, opened the session with a direct question. "Major Mitchell, your program suggests that our massive investments in advanced fighter technology may have created vulnerabilities alongside capabilities. Would you elaborate on that assessment?" Olivia chose her words carefully, aware of the political and industrial implications. "Senator, the technology incorporated in our advanced fighters represents an essential capability that provides American air power with significant advantages. However, our training emphasis has shifted too far towards system management and away from fundamental flying skills. And the practical impact of this shift? Warren pressed. When electronic warfare degrades or compromises our technological advantages, as adversaries are increasingly capable of doing, pilot performance decreases dramatically without the foundation of basic airmanship to fall back on. My program seeks to restore that foundation while maintaining full technological proficiency. A senator from a state with significant defense industry presence leaned forward. Major, are you suggesting we should reconsider our investments in advanced fighter development? Not at all, Senator. I'm suggesting we need to invest equally in the human element of the weapon system. The most sophisticated aircraft in the world is only as effective as the pilot operating it. The hearing continued for over 2 hours, with questions ranging from technical details to broader strategic implications. Throughout, Olivia maintained her central thesis that balanced integration of human skill and technological capability represented the most resilient approach to air combat in an increasingly contested electronic environment. By the session's conclusion, the committee had expressed bipartisan support for expanding the program nationwide, with additional funding allocated specifically for the modified training aircraft and instrumentation systems Olivia had developed. As she gathered her materials after the hearing, General Morris approached from where he had been observing in the rear of the chamber. Impressive performance, Major. You navigated the political crosscurrents as skillfully as you fly. Thank you, sir. It's unfamiliar territory for me. Get used to it, Morris replied. The promotion board results will be released tomorrow. I shouldn't tell you this in advance, but you're looking at silver oak leaves in your immediate future. The promotion to lieutenant colonel, while welcome, was less significant to Olivia than the institutional adoption of her training philosophy. As she returned to Nellis the following day, she found the base buzzing with news from recent deployments, where pilots who had completed her program had demonstrated superior performance during actual operations with degraded systems. Chief Ramirez met her at the flight line, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. Congratulations on the promotion, ma'am. Though around here, most people still just call you Phoenix. The call sign matters less than what it represents, Chief. And what does it represent now? Used to be about those 4 kills over the Gulf. Now it seems to mean something different. Olivia considered the question while watching a formation of T-6s practicing precision maneuvers overhead. Rebirth, I suppose. Not just personal, but institutional. Rediscovering fundamental truths about aviation that technology had begun to obscure. Later that afternoon, she met with the newest class of instructor pilots being certified in her methodology. The group included aviators from every fighter airframe in the inventory, all experienced combat pilots who had volunteered specifically for this assignment. Your mission is more important than you might realize, she told them during the initial briefing. You're not just teaching techniques or procedures. You're changing a mindset, shifting the relationship between pilot and technology from dependency to partnership. Captain Maria Santos, an F-22 pilot with 3 combat deployments, raised her hand. Major, sorry, Colonel now, how do we measure success? What's the metric that tells us we've achieved the right balance? When a pilot can transition seamlessly between full technological support and basic manual operation without loss of effectiveness, Olivia answered. When the cockpit displays go dark and instead of panic, there's confidence. When system failure becomes a manageable contingency rather than an emergency. Lieutenant Walker, now fully established as an instructor in the program, added his perspective. 6 months ago, I would have been lost if my F-22 systems failed during complex operations. Today, I'd be concerned but competent. That's the difference this training makes. As the briefing concluded and the instructors departed for their afternoon flights, Brigadier General Caldwell arrived with news from the Pentagon. The program's being expanded again, she announced. Not just fighter aircraft now, they want to apply your methodology to bomber crews, transport pilots, even drone operators. The principle transcends the platform. This expansion represented a significant evolution. What had begun as a specific response to fighter pilot dependency was becoming a fundamental reassessment of how technology was integrated throughout military aviation. Drone operators? Olivia questioned, surprised by this particular inclusion. Especially drone operators, Caldwell confirmed. They're completely dependent on their technology. What happens when the data link is compromised? Or the sensors are degraded? They need alternative methods for mission accomplishment, just like fighter pilots do. The implications were profound. Olivia's questioning of technological dependency had touched on something more universal than she had initially realized. The essential human judgment that no algorithm or automated system could fully replace. That evening, as sunset painted the desert landscape in brilliant orange and red, Olivia took a rare moment of solitude on the flight line. The T-6 that had started it all, now bearing the Phoenix emblem on its tail, sat gleaming in the fading light. Lieutenant Walker found her there, contemplating the aircraft that had transformed from object of ridicule to symbol of a training revolution. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always, Lieutenant. I've been thinking about that first day, when we all laughed at your prop plane. About how wrong we were, not just about the aircraft, but about what makes a pilot effective." He gestured toward the flight line where both basic trainers and advanced fighters stood side by side. "We thought it was all about the technology, the stealth, the sensors, the computers. We were missing the fundamental truth, which is that the ultimate weapon system isn't the aircraft or its technology. It's the trained human mind making decisions based on skill and judgment." Walker smiled slightly. "In combat, the technology will eventually fail or be compromised. When that happens, it's not the aircraft that determines the outcome, it's the pilot." Olivia nodded, recognizing that Walker had articulated the essence of what her program sought to achieve. "That's what the Phoenix represents, Lieutenant. Not just rising from failure, but emerging stronger because of it." As darkness settled over the desert base and the first stars appeared overhead, Olivia reflected on the journey from marginalized instructor to program architect. The mockery of her prop plane had given way to recognition of a fundamental truth about aviation that transcended technology, that in the critical moments when systems failed and computers faltered, it was the human element that made the difference between disaster and success. The callsign that had once marked her as different now symbolized a philosophy embraced throughout the Air Force. Phoenix no longer referred just to her experience over the Persian Gulf, but to the rebirth of an approach to aviation that balanced technological advancement with fundamental human skill. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new expansions of the program, and new opportunities to influence the future of military aviation. But for this moment, watching the stars emerge above the aircraft that had started it all, Olivia Mitchell found satisfaction in knowing that something essential had been preserved, not in opposition to progress, but as its necessary foundation. The prop plane they had laughed at had become the instrument of transformation, and the callsign they had whispered had become the standard by which a new generation of pilots would measure themselves, not just users of technology, but masters of their craft in its most fundamental form. 2 years after the inception of the Balanced Airmanship Initiative, Lieutenant Colonel Olivia "Phoenix" Mitchell stood at the podium of the Air Force Association's annual symposium in Washington, D.C. The grand ballroom was filled with military leaders, defense industry, executives, and aviation experts from around the world, all gathered to hear about the program that had fundamentally transformed fighter pilot training across the United States Air Force. Behind her, a large screen displayed a simple image, the silhouette of a T-6 Texan II alongside an F-35 Lightning II, with the Phoenix emblem bridging the two aircraft. The symbolism was unmistakable, a visual representation of how basic airmanship and advanced technology had been reunited through her program. When we began this journey, Olivia started, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room, we faced a paradox of modern aviation. Our aircraft had become more capable, more sophisticated, and more lethal. Yet our pilots had become increasingly dependent on systems that could be compromised, confused, or defeated. She advanced the slide to show performance metrics from recent combat deployments. Today, I'm pleased to report that after 2 years of implementation, the Balanced Airmanship Initiative has yielded concrete results in operational environments. Pilots who have completed the integrated training show an 87% mission success rate during system degradation scenarios, compared to 32% before the program began. These weren't just training statistics, they represented actual combat operations where American fighters had encountered sophisticated electronic warfare and still accomplished their missions. Lives saved, objectives secured, and threats neutralized despite adversaries' best efforts to blind or confuse advanced systems. After concluding her presentation, Olivia found herself surrounded by international military representatives eager to discuss implementing similar programs in their own air forces. The British Royal Air Force, Israeli Air Force, and Japan Air Self-Defense Force had already begun adopting modified versions of her approach, creating a global renaissance in fundamental flying skills alongside technological advancement. As the crowd thinned, a distinguished older gentleman approached, retired General Robert Eagle Pearson, a legendary fighter pilot from the Vietnam era who had recorded 27 confirmed kills. "Colonel Mitchell," he said, extending his hand, "I've been following your work with great interest. Reminds me of something we used to say back in my day. Fly the plane first, fight the battle second." "That wisdom never expired, sir," Olivia replied. "We just temporarily forgot it." Pearson nodded thoughtfully. "Every generation seems to learn the same lessons. Technology changes, but the fundamentals remain. What you've done is remind an entire service of that essential truth." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Secretary of Defense Amanda Reeves, accompanied by Air Force Chief of Staff General Morris. "Colonel Mitchell," the secretary greeted her, "your presentation was compelling. The President has taken personal interest in your program's success. He's asked me to extend an invitation for you to brief him directly at the White House next week." This unexpected development elevated the Balanced Airmanship Initiative beyond military circles into the highest levels of national security policy. What had begun as a response to a specific training deficiency had evolved into a fundamental reassessment of how human operators and advanced technology should be integrated across all defense systems. The following day found Olivia at Andrews Air Force Base, observing a demonstration of the program's latest evolution, the Integrated Resilience Training Module. This advanced phase combined the T-6's basic airmanship emphasis with modified frontline fighters specifically designed to simulate progressive system degradation during complex operations. Lieutenant Walker, now Captain Walker and head instructor for the module, led the briefing with the confidence of someone who had fully embraced the program's philosophy. "Today's scenario represents the most challenging conditions our pilots might face in contested airspace," he explained to the gathered observers. "Progressive electronic attack will degrade systems in sequence, forcing seamless transition between full technological support and basic manual operation." The exercise that followed demonstrated just how far the training had advanced. Pilots flying modified F-22s and F-35s engaged in complex air combat maneuvering while their aircraft systems were systematically compromised, first targeting, then communications, then navigation, and finally display interfaces. Where such degradation would once have resulted in mission abort or worse, these pilots adapted smoothly to each failure, transitioning between technological assistance and basic airmanship without losing combat effectiveness. They weren't fighting their aircraft's confused systems. They were working with them when useful and working around them when necessary. The key breakthrough wasn't technological, Olivia explained to the distinguished visitors observing the exercise. It was psychological. We changed the relationship between pilot and machine from dependency to partnership. Secretary of Defense Reeves watched intently as an F-35 pilot completed a precision weapons delivery despite having lost most advanced targeting systems. The implications extend far beyond fighter operations, don't they, Colonel? Yes, Madam. Secretary. The principle applies to any domain where human operators interface with complex technology, naval operations, ground combat systems, even space assets. Precisely why the President wants to speak with you, Reeves replied. There's consideration of expanding your approach across all service branches under a new Joint Resilience Directive. This possibility represented an exponential expansion of influence beyond anything Olivia had imagined when she first climbed into that mockable prop plane years earlier. The fundamental principle she had championed, maintaining human skill as the foundation for technological advancement rather than its replacement, was being recognized as essential to national security at the highest levels. The White House briefing the following week proved to be a turning point not just for the program, but for defense strategy more broadly. In the Situation Room, surrounded by the National Security Council and military leadership, Olivia presented the philosophical underpinnings of her approach rather than just the technical details. Mr. President, she concluded, our most sophisticated weapons systems are only as resilient as the humans operating them. By rebalancing our training to emphasize fundamental skills alongside technological proficiency, we create a force that can adapt to system degradation rather than being paralyzed by it. President Harrison Matthews, a former Navy pilot himself, nodded thoughtfully. What you're describing isn't just a training methodology, Colonel. It's a different way of thinking about the relationship between humans and technology in warfare. Yes, sir, that's precisely the point. And the industrial implications? Defense contractors have invested billions in automated systems designed to reduce pilot workload. Those systems remain valuable, Mr. President. We're not rejecting technology. We're ensuring it enhances human capability rather than replacing it. The goal is resilience through integration, not dependency. After the briefing, the President authorized the Joint Resilience Directive, formally expanding Olivia's approach across all military branches. Each service would adapt the core principles to their specific operational requirements, creating a comprehensive approach to human technology integration throughout the defense establishment. 2 months later, the directive faced its first major test under combat conditions. A squadron of F-35s deployed to the Pacific region encountered sophisticated electronic warfare during a freedom of navigation operation near disputed territories. Foreign systems successfully compromised many of the fighters' advanced capabilities, creating conditions that would have forced mission abort under previous training paradigms. Instead, the pilots, all graduates of the Balanced Airmanship Program, seamlessly transitioned to manual operation modes, continuing their mission using fundamental flying skills enhanced by the remaining functional systems. What their adversaries had intended as a demonstration of American vulnerability, instead, became a powerful affirmation of the new training approach. The after-action report, classified at the highest levels, concluded, pilots maintained mission effectiveness despite loss of 78% of automated systems. Seamless transition between technological and manual operations prevented adversary from achieving desired mission impact. Balanced Airmanship Initiative directly credited with mission success. When this report reached the Pentagon, General Morris immediately called Olivia to his office. "You've been vindicated in the most meaningful way possible," he told her, sliding the report across his desk. Real combat, real electronic attack, real results. The program worked exactly as you said it would. It's not about vindication, sir. It's about effectiveness. Nevertheless, Morris continued, this success has accelerated interest in expanding your approach. The Army wants to apply it to helicopter operations and drone systems. The Navy is considering a modified version for carrier aviation and even submarine crews. Your little prop plane has launched something that's changing the entire military. The general wasn't exaggerating. Within weeks, Olivia found herself traveling to Fort Rucker to advise Army aviation on implementing similar principles for helicopter pilots, then to Pensacola to consult with naval aviation training commands. Each service faced unique challenges, but the core philosophy remained consistent. Technology should enhance human capability rather than replace fundamental skills. During a brief return to Nellis between consulting assignments, Olivia took time to fly the original T-6 that had started it all. Chief Master Sergeant Ramirez, still maintaining the training aircraft with meticulous care, watched as she performed her pre-flight inspection with the same methodical precision she had always demonstrated. They've promoted you to full bird, Colonel, given you access to the President, and made your program national policy, Ramirez observed. But you still check the oil and control surfaces yourself instead of having someone else do it. Some habits are worth keeping, Chief, especially the ones that remind us why we're doing this in the first place. And why is that, exactly? After all this time, I'm still not sure I fully understand what drives you. Olivia paused, hand resting on the T-6's propeller. When my systems failed over the Persian Gulf, I wasn't thinking about training philosophies or technological dependencies. I was just trying to stay alive and complete the mission. What I realized afterward was that the skills that saved me that day were precisely the ones being gradually eroded by our increasing reliance on automated systems. She continued her inspection, checking control cables and hinges with practiced movements. This isn't about rejecting progress or clinging to the past. It's about ensuring that the foundation remains solid as we build higher. About remembering that in the critical moment when everything goes wrong, it's not the technology that determines the outcome. It's the human being making decisions under pressure. Ramirez nodded slowly. That's why they still call you Phoenix. Not just because you survived that day, but because you brought something essential back from the ashes. After completing her flight, a simple hour of basic maneuvers that reconnected her with the pure joy of flying, Olivia returned to find Captain Walker waiting with news from Washington. They're creating a new position, ma'am. Director of Joint Resilience Training, reporting directly to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Word is, you're the only candidate being considered. The position would represent another significant advancement, from program developer to strategic leader, shaping human technology integration across the entire military. It would mean leaving the daily training environment she had built at Nellis, but it would also amplify her influence to levels that could reshape military capabilities for decades to come. There's something else, Walker added. The first class of international exchange officers arrives next week. Pilots from 12 allied nations coming to learn the methodology directly from us. They're calling it the Phoenix Program internationally. This development brought the initiative full circle, from a localized experiment born of necessity to an international standard for military aviation training. The prop plane that had once been mocked had spawned a global reassessment of how pilots should be trained in an era of increasing technological sophistication. The following week brought another milestone as Olivia presided over the graduation of the 100th class to complete the full balanced airmanship curriculum. The ceremony, held on the Nellis flight line with the distinctive yellow T-6s arranged in formation behind the podium, was attended by senior leadership from every military branch. When you arrived 6 months ago, she told the graduating pilots, Many of you were skeptical about what flying a prop plane could possibly teach you about operating advanced fighters. Today, you understand that the connection between pilot and aircraft transcends the technology involved, that the fundamental principles of aviation remain constant whether you're flying a T-6 or an F-35. She gestured to the aircraft behind her. These trainers aren't relics or museum pieces. They're the bridge between pure flying skill and technological enhancement, the foundation upon which everything else is built. When you return to your frontline fighters, you'll bring with you not just advanced system knowledge, but a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be a pilot. Among the graduates was a young lieutenant who had initially been one of the program's most vocal critics. During the reception following the ceremony, he approached Olivia with newfound humility. "Colonel, I owe you an apology. When I first saw that prop plane, I thought this was a waste of time, a step backward from the advanced systems I'd trained on. I couldn't have been more wrong." "What changed your perspective, Lieutenant?" "The day we practiced complete electrical failure during complex maneuvering. In my F-22 simulator training, that scenario was always treated as a terminal emergency requiring immediate recovery. But after learning to fly precisely using just stick, rudder, and throttle, I realized it was manageable, challenging, but not catastrophic. This transformation of perspective, from system dependency to capability confidence, represented the program's most profound impact. It wasn't just about skill development, but about psychological resilience, the confidence to continue the mission even when technology failed." Later that evening, Brigadier General Caldwell found Olivia in her office, reviewing candidate files for the next training cycle. "The Joint Chiefs approved your appointment," Caldwell announced without preamble. "Director of Joint Resilience Training, with the rank of Brigadier General effective immediately. Congratulations, General Mitchell." The promotion meant leaving Nellis and the daily operation of the program she had built, but it also meant the opportunity to expand its impact across all domains of military operations. The prop plane that had launched her journey would remain at Nellis, continuing to teach new generations of pilots the fundamental skills that technology could enhance but never replace. "There's a ceremony planned at the Pentagon next month," Caldwell continued. "They're calling it the Phoenix Initiative, now expanding beyond aviation to all domains where human operators interface with complex technology. You've started something that's changing the entire defense establishment." As Caldwell departed, Olivia took a moment to reflect on the journey from marginalized instructor to program architect to strategic leader. The calsign that had once marked her as different, Phoenix, now represented a philosophy embraced throughout the military and beyond. Her office walls, once bare except for training schedules and flight regulations, now displayed photographs and mementos tracking the program's evolution. The original T-6 with its newly painted Phoenix emblem, the first class of instructors, international delegations studying the methodology, and combat reports documenting real-world successes. Most meaningful was a simple framed quote from a pilot who had successfully completed a combat mission despite near-complete system failure. "When the screens went dark, I remembered what Colonel Mitchell taught us: fly the plane first, fight the battle second. That principle brought us home." The following morning, Olivia made time for one final flight in the original T-6 before departing for her new assignment in Washington. Chief Ramirez had prepared the aircraft personally, ensuring every system was perfectly maintained. "She miss you," Ramirez said as Olivia completed her pre-flight inspection. "This old bird has become associated with you in everyone's mind." "She's in good hands, Chief. The next generation of instructors will keep her flying and teaching." As she taxied toward the runway, Olivia noticed something unexpected: a line of pilots and maintenance personnel forming along the taxiway, standing at attention. At first a dozen, then 50, then over 100 personnel had spontaneously gathered to honor her departure. Tower clearance came with unusual warmth. Phoenix 1, you are cleared for takeoff. Runway 03 left. Wind calm. The pattern is yours for as long as you want it. As the T-6 lifted into the clear desert sky, Olivia felt the same connection between pilot and aircraft that had defined her entire career. The direct translation of hand movements to flight. Control, the immediate response of the engine to throttle adjustments. The physical sensation of air moving across control surfaces. She executed a series of precise maneuvers, rolls, loops, and wingovers that demonstrated the pure joy of flight without technological mediation. It wasn't a ceremonial demonstration, but a personal reaffirmation of why aviation had captured her heart from the beginning. After landing, as she secured the aircraft one final time, Captain Walker approached with an unusual request. The instructors pooled together to get you something, ma'am. We hope you'll accept it. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a perfectly crafted model of the T-6 Texan II, painted in the exact scheme of the aircraft she had just flown, complete with the Phoenix emblem on the tail. Beneath it, a simple inscription. They laughed at her prop plane until they saw her calcine, and then they learned to fly again. It's not much compared to a General Star, Walker said, but we wanted you to have something to remember. Where this all began. It began with a failure, Captain, system failure over the Persian Gulf, that forced me back to fundamentals. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from our most challenging moments. Walker nodded thoughtfully. That's the real meaning of Phoenix, isn't it? Not just survival, but transformation through adversity. Finding strength in what seems like weakness. The metaphor extended beyond her personal journey to encompass the entire program, rising from the ashes of technological dependency to create a more resilient approach to modern warfare. What had begun as mockery of an obsolete training. Aircraft had evolved into respect for timeless principles that technology could enhance but never replace. The following day, as Olivia prepared to board the transport aircraft that would take her to Washington and her new responsibilities, she took one final look across the Nellis flight line. The distinctive yellow T-6 trainers sat alongside the stealth gray fighters, visual representations of the balance she had fought to restore. Brigadier General Caldwell, who would oversee the program in her absence, joined her for the final walk to the aircraft. It won't be the same without you. Caldwell admitted, you created something special here. It was never about me, Olivia replied. It was about remembering what makes a pilot effective when everything else fails. About building technology around human capability rather than trying to remove the human element from the equation. As she climbed aboard the transport, Olivia carried with her not just the model of the T-6 and her new general's insignia, but the knowledge that her journey had come full circle. The prop plane they had laughed at had become the symbol of a training revolution. The calcine they had dismissed had become the standard by which military effectiveness was measured in an age of increasing technological vulnerability. In the years that followed, the Phoenix Initiative would expand far beyond military aviation to encompass all domains, where human operators interfaced with advanced technology. Its core principle, maintaining fundamental skills, as the foundation for technological enhancement rather than its replacement, would influence everything from spacecraft design to autonomous vehicle development to artificial intelligence. Integration. But it had all begun with a simple yellow prop plane, a marginalized instructor, and a calcine that reminded everyone of an essential truth. When technology fails, as it inevitably will, the difference between disaster and success lies in the human being who understands that systems are tools, not crutches, extensions of capability rather than replacements for skill. The prop plane they had laughed at had changed military aviation forever. And the calcine they had once whispered had become the embodiment of resilience in an age of technological dependency, a reminder that no matter how sophisticated our tools become, the hand that wields them remains the most important factor in determining the outcome. In Pentagon briefing rooms, flight lines across the world, and combat operations in contested environments, the lesson lived on. Technology would continue to advance, but the foundation of success remained the skilled human operator who could adapt when systems failed and prevail when others faltered. That was the legacy of Phoenix, not just a call sign, but a philosophy that had transformed modern warfare by remembering its most fundamental truth. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.